Hey, let's do module 2.8. Let's do some more research on your golden prospects. In this case, we're going to check to see whether he or she grants interviews. Why is it important? Well, I'm not going to tell you yet. That's for a later module. But it will come in handy if your golden prospect grants interviews. For now, you just want to check out whether or not they do. And when I was researching Eric Ward back in the day, before I built a relationship up with him and earned a link and then started doing a lot more business with him, I interviewed him. I didn't have to interview him, but I did. But I chose that strategy, and you can see. Let me pull it up. I did the interview, and well, that's not the interview. Right here's the interview, and that I did with Eric. And I won't play it right now.
It might make sense for you to issue a press release and very carefully find 20 news outlets in Knoxville that will be most likely to care because I
Hey, Eric. That's Eric. So that's yeah. I interviewed Eric, and you may want to interview your prospect too. So a good way to find out whether or not they grant interviews is easy. Just put their name in and type interview. And when I did that for Eric Ward, I saw a lot of his former interviews came up, and then he even had a section on his website that showed all his interviews. So why is that important to why was that important to me as a link builder? Shouldn't I just reach out to him and tell him how great my content was, and then ask for the link? Well, that doesn't work. Instead, I read every interview that he was in, and I listened to every interview, and I watched every interview, and I got used to what his answers were and what he liked talking about. When you'd start talking real fast, and that's when he'd get excited. And then I wanted to create an interview based on those points, and that I think helped Eric and I have a great interview. But more important than that great interview was I sent him my interview questions early, and then he looked at him. He goes, "These are unlike any interview questions." Yes, I want to do this interview. He loved the interview questions. Why? Because I knew his interviews. I studied his interviews. I knew what he liked talking about. And most people that do interviews and they reach out to golden prospects for interviews, what happens is they just get to the point where they just rush through it and they come up with a few stupid questions. And it's a questions like, what do you think of link building? Is link building dead? I mean, that's an embarrassment to ask a guru a question like that. Somebody that knows what they're doing, and then you get them on an interview and ask a mundane, just a lowbrow question that anyone can answer. It just it's not an opportunity for them to show off their intellect. And I don't mean show off, I mean display their intellect. These golden prospects make money from their intellect and from displaying their intellect with others. And if you can do an interview that helps your golden prospect, it displays that special something about them that is unique and that is something that draws a crowd and makes money for them, because by the time some of these golden prospects will have a lot of traffic and they'll be very seasoned. And if you follow their interviews, you'll follow the lead they set in those interviews, and then send the interview questions to your golden prospect ahead of time. What'll happen is you'll get to a point where they'll love the questions. They'll love the questions, and then what'll happen then is that will get them to grant the interview. And what's great is the interview will be great, and you'll set the interview up on your site. Then you'll ask them to link to you. But that's not why I like the interview. Why I like the interview is what happens before the call and what happens after the interview. There's usually 5-10 minutes of chit chat. Then there's 5-10 minutes of chit chat afterwards. And your golden prospect, once you give them a great interview, at the end of the chit chat, when the show's over and you do the chit chat with them, and you're doing the wind down, they're going to thank you. And they're going to love the fact that you just hooked their business up because you didn't do a stupid interview with them. You gave them a really good interview. You ask questions that make them money. You ask questions that they want to answer. And you can tell what they want to answer by reading their interviews. Another way you can tell whether or not your golden prospect does interviews is to do a site search. Let me pull it up. So it's not really hard. Search to find out. Search your golden prospect's name, and then interviews. and interviewed, and that's usually a good way to do it. And and if you can't find it that way, do this search here, and just go to the do a site search and type interview. Usually, if they're linking to interviews, or if they're doing interviews, they're probably putting transcripts on their page and their site, and you'll find it. So it was easy for me to find Eric's interview, and just I went to his site. I did this site ericward.com interview, and do the same with your golden prospect sites too, and find out what interviews are taking place. And if you do that, then study those interviews. Uh, Find out which ones your prospects really like. They'll start talking faster, or if they're bored, and you know to avoid those questions. Then, giving with the rest, when it comes time to interview your golden prospect, you're going to have really good questions, and I'll teach you how to do that in a later module when we're actually reaching out to the prospects. But for now, and that will entail some of the other research you did in the previous videos, and what you're going to do in the videos below. But the idea now is just get to the point where you find out whether or not your prospects do interviews, and if they do, read them and watch them and listen to them. Take notes. That's all you need to do right now as far as interviews. Find out whether or not they do it, study them if they do. Thanks. See you next module.